Okay, we are back now for policy number 6. We are 3/4 of the way through, so just bear with me. We're almost done here, and then we'll. This is kind of big. This is a big document, so you can click down the links below to make sure you get the details. But this is kind of important. So now we're getting into the law and basics of Christian civilization. So these are some important differences, maybe between our policy and our politics than other parties. General statements, origin and purpose of the law. The Bible makes it clear that it's man's original sin alienated man from God and made law imperative, meaning important. Man is restrained by one or two ways, either internal, religious convictions and conscience, or external forces, which is the law. And we do have the Bible that sets kind of the general guidelines, and if we're not self-checking against that, then we also need the outside external resources of the law. So both are important. If all you had was the Bible and everybody agreed to use that and be judged by that, then that would be one thing, but we need external laws. Overregulation. Review with concern the recent tendencies to enact specific legislation on every single problem. And it refers to the common law remedy that if it doesn't exist, then even more seriously, if it's whether it's compatible with principles already given in the Bible. So we just have a problem with we're coming up with a million little tiny laws when in fact you can be judged by a lot of bigger principles instead of little tiny laws. And there's a lot of issues with that, and that's overregulation. But that's when government tries to increase its power, and at the same time that's when people get lazy, and instead of governing themselves by principles, they try to let another power source control them, because sometimes that's easier. So it's just human nature that kind of heads toward that. We got to fight that natural instinct. Justice. We affirm that the Bible defines justice in general as which is equitable and that which is right in a moral sense. Justice in common law. Justice consists of judicial procedures based on the principles of God's revealed word as found in the Ten Commandments, amplified in direct instructions to the prophets, perfected in the teachings of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And these are the basis of common law developed in Great Britain over like 1400 years, which has, of course, has been imparted to Canada, amongst other British colonies and things like that from Europe. And we know the importance of maintaining the biblical basis of common law, transcending any clauses or judgments under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, or any rulings or interpretation by human rights commissions, in accordance to the preamble to the Canadian Constitution. We affirm that the letter of the common law includes these rules which govern man's conduct in society, which are enforced by a branch of civil government through the application of penalties. We recognize the spirit of the law as being that unwritten aspect of common law which takes into consideration established procedures and circumstances, and justice rendering consideration to the moral code and conduct of the Bible. So that's pretty interesting. Now, legislation, legislative responsibilities and limits within laws. Our Christian heritage. This is important. We believe, and Canada's Constitution asserts that Canada was founded on Christian principles. Okay, here we go. This is an important line. We believe, and Canada's Constitution asserts, that Canada was founded on Christian principles and that the essential values of Canada are represented by our Christian heritage. We affirm it to be the duty of Parliament to declare constitutionally that Canada is a nation based on Christian principles in law and in our conduct. Any matter which clearly involves a biblical principle must not be subjected to a public referendum. Meaning, if it's already clearly stated in the Bible and Canada has already established that we are a Christian nation, we should not have to just publicly vote on matters because it's already been determined. Okay, so defending Christian observances and institutions. We assert that neither legislative or judicial procedure should be permitted to alter or deny any Christian observance. We also affirm that there is an inherent necessity in the sinful world for government to respect and to protect the sanctity of Christian institutes. The freedom of faith and worship. With respect to freedom of faith and worship, we affirm that neither individual or legislatives may require conformity to any particular religious faith or system. That's for anybody. Respect for God's authority. We affirm that contempt of the Bible or any form of blasphemy against God are an offense which Parliament has an obligation to prohibit and declare as morally wrong. Respect for requirements of Christian service. By neither legislative or judicial procedure shall any outside authority determine the qualifications or disqualifications for clergy or officials, church discipline, or the conditions of membership in any Christian church. Okay, the Lord's Day Act. We believe that the Lord's Day Act should be restored, subject to provision for essential services and faiths or denominations which desire a day other than Sunday for religious observance. In all cases, there must be given 1 day in every 7 for rest and observance. Okay, interesting. Government funding. We affirm that religious organizations should not receive government funding in any form, direct or indirect, other than as a fee for specific services when acting as an official agent of the government. So the government should not be paying the church anything. Tax immunity. Church income and property used specifically for lawful and regular religious purposes shall not be subjected to any form of taxation, except to charge for services rendered by the government. Okay, because I have a big. This is getting into church versus charity stuff, and I have lots of thoughts on that. But here is CHP's issue: the church income and property used specifically for lawful and regular religious purposes shall not be subjected to any form of taxation, except to charge for services rendered by the government. Okay, interesting. I'll have to comment on that later, I suppose. Because the other way is they should be taxed. And by not being taxed, then they might have different rules. And this is the problem with being a charity now, is they're not being taxed, but have rules because that not taxing comes with a list of rules, and therefore the church is no longer the church if they are a charity. Because if you actually read the requirements of a charity, a CRA charity, it is in direct violation of what a church needs to do and its requirement as a Bible-believing church. So you cannot be both. So by the letter of the paper, either of the Bible or the letter of the Agreement of Canada. Anyways, moral law. In the interest of preserving God-ordained roles for marriage and singleness in our society, the CHP would restore elements of Canada's pre-1969 criminal code, which conform to moral law by outlawing adultery and sexual aberrations, thereby preventing this behavior from being openly flaunted in public or being taught as normal or an alternative lifestyle. Okay, so I'd have to look up this pre-1969 criminal code, and so hopefully openly flaunting sexual aberrations and adultery should not be normal. It's what the CHP is standing on. individual human worth, sanctity of human life. We affirm that human life exists and is sacred from conception and has God-given value, regardless of age, race, gender, or physical or mental handicap. We believe that the human body is the property of God and that no one but God has the authority to terminate human life, except in accord with the express provisions of the Bible. No person, institute, or government shall tolerate, encourage, or decree death by means such as an abortion, euthanasia, or suicide. Abortion. We favor the elimination of all public funding of organizations that advocate or perform abortion. Abortion is the deliberate killing of an innocent human being and therefore is a crime against God, the preborn child, the mother, the father, and society. It should be treated as such by the government and must not be permitted or supported. The preborn child has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. From the moment of conception, these rights of the preborn must be protected in Canada's law through the appropriate amendments to our criminal code and Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Once this protection is in force, any person who performs or assists in an abortion or arranges for a woman to have an abortion should be charged with criminal offense. Any medical practitioner convicted of performing an abortion or assisting or arranging for a woman to have an abortion should have his or her license suspended. Any individual or corporation that manufactures, distributes, sells, or administers any drug or device for the purpose of procuring an abortion should be charged with criminal offenses. The government has a moral responsibility to provide financial assistance to social, community, and voluntary agencies which provide care and support for women during and after crisis pregnancies. Medical treatment which is necessary to prevent the deaths of either the mother and or the preborn child or both, but which results in the unintended death of either or both, should not be considered a criminal offense. Every effort should be made to save both lives. That's on abortion. Human worth. We affirm that the value and dignity of the individual is derived from the fact that man was created in the image of God. Deliberate or degradation or abuse of the human condition, either real or simulated, is therefore an offense against God. In consequence, all human degradation, whether it's pornography, shall be prescribed by law with punishment as may be appropriate. So if you're degrading the image of humans, you should pay a punishment. Compassion for the needy. We affirm that the civil authority must ensure the adequacy provision is made for those in our society who are truly helpless or needy. And it's our responsibility. Care for the suffering. We affirm that it's a crucial role of the family in celebrating the joys, in being mutual responsible for being supportive of each other in the time of suffering. Government efforts should be directed toward encouraging families to provide home care for the sick and elderly. Proper codes for medical, palliative, and hospice care will include facilitating the alleviation of suffering and preventing the taking of human life. Reproductive technologies. Except under the very special circumstances and controls, human genetic engineering is an attempt to alter God's creation artificially and therefore does not properly respect the sanctity of life. Forms of reproduction technology and methods of birth control leading to abortion, non-therapeutic experimentation, and assaults on the fidelity of the husband or wife relationship are contrary to our principles. Embryo experimentation, in vitro fertilization, artificial insemination by donor, segregate mother, IVF, and insemination of lesbians. We oppose applications to humans of technologies like cloning. Sanctity of marriage and the family. Marriage. Marriage is a divinely ordained and permitted institute which requires the government's protection. The purpose of marriage is for the mutual enrichment of both husband and wife, the propagation of the human race, and the foundation of the establishment of orderly society. The family. We affirm that the family is God-ordained institution and the fundamental indispensable basis of human society, that it consists of a man and a woman lawfully wedded in a secure home, where natural or adopted children can be lovingly nurtured to maturity. We affirm that heterosexual monogamous marriages is God ordained as the foundation of the family, and that any other form of union whatsoever is biblically prohibited. We believe that widespread violation of these prohibitions inevitably leads to a moral collapse and society designation. Sexual aberrations. It should be beyond the power of any legislative or administrative body to recognize, affirm, or condone, or discriminate in favor identifiable sexual aberrant individuals or groups. Yeah, so you can't recognize, affirm, condone, or discriminate any apparent group. Responsibility of the family. The sphere of responsibility of the family includes the conception, health, physical care, spiritual nurturing, discipline, education, and supervision of the children, in care and respect for the elderly. State of intervention. We deny the right of the state or any state-sanctioned body to intervene in the family or to remove any child from the families, except in cases of demonstrable abuse of the child. Discipline. We affirm the obligation of the family to impose firmly but kindly discipline on the child, to build character, and to curb harmful attitudes or habits. Mothers and homemakers. We affirm that the vital role in society which mothers can perform is that of the homemaker and rearer of the child. Further, that failure in this role imperils the rising generation and the future society and the state. We therefore assert the government efforts would be directed primarily towards so ordering the economy that mothers will not find it necessary to supplement family income by work outside the home. Homemakers must receive equal recognition under the law and should be able to submit joint tax returns with their income earning spouse. We believe that parents who choose to be homemakers should have the option of contributing to the Canada Pension Plan, and that their contributions should be deductible from the spouse's taxable income. That's a mouthful. I have no comment on that at this moment. Childcare. We affirm that it is the responsibility of the parents and not the state to raise and educate their children. The benefits of a responsible home environment is the most desirable form of child rearing. We therefore support the concept of in-home child care facilities and do not favor institutional child care. The rearing of children should take place in the home, and it is the responsibility of government to encourage this. However, where this is not possible, we wish to see a viable family-oriented alternative provided. Premise, right? Because based on current society, the state wants to watch your kids, and a lot of parents want the state to watch their kids and watch everybody's kids, and that's a whole philosophy in itself, and it's pretty, it has its dangers. The responsibility of the parents for the education and development of their children must indeed be recognized by the government. We affirm that parents have the primary responsibility of educating their children at home or delegating this task to schools and their choice, regardless of the choice of school. Okay, national guidelines. Safeguards and disincentives should be in place at the federal level, if necessary, to discourage any publicly funded institute from openly teaching neutral or positive attitudes toward abortion, infanticide, euthanasia, suicide, homosexuality, extramarital sex, the occult, or any political ideology which favors world government at the expense of national sovereignty. Okay, so those are general guidelines. Even though you could say education is provincial, we're saying that there should be some general national guidelines. Okay, here we go. Kevin here. We are going to read the second part of Policy 6, and it is, and then it's still a few minutes long. This whole chapter is a very long one. So anyways, honesty and integrity. Oh, hang on. So government must set good examples, right, in conduct and integrity, and we're going to deal with it if it's not. It follows similar moral integrity that should be found in the conduct of our leaders, and that's a good thing. So freedom of speech and association. Yep. Anyways, so speech, opinion, and public opinion. We affirm the right of freedom of speech, opinion, and publication subject to the laws of libel, defamation, and property. The CHP believes that laws prohibiting hate and self-defeating are self-defeating. Okay, the CHP believes that laws prohibiting hate are self-defeating and infringe upon freedom of speech and expression because any accusation of hate involves a purely subjective interpretation of a statement or action and is subjectively considered to be offensive. So in dealing with truly bigoted statements uttered in public, a much better result is obtained by allowing such statements to expose their stupidity and then let others, more rational spokesmen for the proponents of a sober point, denounce their offensive statements, thus setting the record straight without resorting to court action and endless discrimination or endless criminalization of hurt feelings. So the CHP believes in freedom of speech, including hateful speech. If somebody wants to be stupid and say really dumb things, well, those people can do that, and others can come out in their defense. But to criminalize hateful speech is just a recipe for disaster. Free speech carries responsibility, and it's not to be interpreted as freedom to divulge secrets, right? So we deny the right of any civil servant or any official to break his oath entrusted with him unless it's in a court of law. We support enacting and enforcement of legislation to combat the moral blight of pornography in our land. We affirm that erotic materials give a false impression of love and sexuality, glamorization, promiscuity, by depicting abhorrent sex behaviors, promoting degrading acts such as bestiality, perversion, cruelty, homosexuality throughout as though they were normal. It creates a thirst for increasing offensive behaviors. It may incite one to harm others in an attempt to satisfy perverted acts and fantasies that have been aroused through prolonged involvement with erotica. If hardcore pornography is steadily accessed to some, it will inevitably be available to all. Since children must be shielded from pornography during formative years, we advocate stringent criterion penalties pursuant to the importation, production, sale, and distribution of obscene materials. Interesting. Okay. Let me just go back to let's go back to this freedom. Let's go back to the speech, opinion, and publication. This is very much timely because even in the liberals have been super deviant in their unusual pursuit of trying to criminalize what they're calling Islamophobia. It's elevating one special speech above others, that you can no longer talk about a certain group of people or belief without it being labeled something, labeled hate or Islamophobic, and that for some reason is carrying a unusual and heavier weighted set of criteria that people judge you against. It doesn't matter what religion you are or belief. No one belief or religion or anything is above another. And it is of my opinion that they all need to be protected. But even more so is they all need to be protected by allowing people to say what they need to say about anything. Certain things can be right and certain things can be wrong, and that's opinion. And it's okay to state your opinion, including saying things are right or wrong, or good or bad, or evil, right and wrong. Like, it's okay to say, hey, we're exclusively right or they're exclusively wrong or whatever. And it doesn't matter what religion or whatever. If you actually start trying to protect one versus another, or protect one group over another, then you are by definition actually promoting that. So anyways, that's not a good thing. So that's current issues right now. So we affirm that liberty of expression and association includes freedom of movement and the freedom of citizens to stand for public office. So that's good. Criminal law. Crime, self-restraint, and legal restraint. Crime is any act Crime is any act of offense against persons or property or society in general which is punishable by law. We affirm that human beings are restrained from criminal acts in two ways: self-restraint or legal restraint. Therefore, in all cases where self-restraint is inadequate, the law must provide deterrence and punishment. Proper pursuit of justice. We affirm that in maintaining the law, the state is not justified in provoking crime by entrapment or by pursuing individuals or groups where there is not reasonable and sufficient evidence that a crime has been or is about to be committed. Mitigating circumstances. Pleas of insanity. There should be no pleas of temporary insanity. The spiritual and emotional disturbances which led an offender to commit a crime should be addressed as part of the redress or rehabilitations, measures handed down at the time of sentencing. There should be no pleas of temporary insanity. It's all part of the person. Intoxication with alcohol or other psychoactive substances which are self-administered should never be considered to be mitigating circumstances in relationship to the perpetrating of any crime, but should be considered as aggravating the crime, as is already in the case relation to motor vehicle offenses. So just because you drink or you do drugs does not lessen your liability. The jury selection should be at random, limited in time, and void of questioning as to the personal opinions of the prospective jurors. Jurors should be allowed to keep notes, ask questions, and have access to all evidence. Capital punishment. We affirm that man was created in the image of God, and therefore all human life should be protected by laws that require the ultimate detriments and punishment for the shedding of innocent blood. Government has a God-given responsibility to use its power to punish those who commit crimes and to protect those who are innocent. We're supposed to protect the innocent ones from those that commit crimes. The law should provide for justice, which includes capital punishment for those who commit first-degree premeditated murder. So basically, for those that commit first-degree premeditated murder, we need to protect society from those that do such things. And capital punishment is such a thing. Biblical requirements versus community standards. We affirm that enforcement of the law must be based on biblical principles and not upon current notions of community standards, the modern equivalent of every man did what was right in his own eyes, a condition of anarchy which in our time can lead only to demoralization and disintegration of Canadian society. Self-defense and firearms. We affirm that self-defense is a basic human right which must not be abridged. Citizens should be permitted to possess and use firearms within limits of reasonable law, providing for registration of concealable weapons and for purposes of hunting and sportsmanship and or the defense of family and innocence from aggressors, including onto the defender's property. We assert that the federal government must not restrict the right of law-abiding citizens to own firearms, whether for sporting use or for self-defense. The use of violence in protest. The government has been entrusted by God with the use of the sword for the protection of the citizens and the punishment of evil. Groups of people or individuals, unless acting in self-defense or defense of a family and innocence, are not justified in using force to oppose others. The government is to respect the freedom of non-violent expression. Punishment and rehabilitation. We affirm that the system of justice has several objectives and aspirations. To make it absolutely clear to all what is unlawful, you got to make it clear. To make it clear by measure of the severity of the punishment, what are the greater and lesser offenses. To prevent, so far as possible, the committing of offenses by making clear the consequences, and to introduce, if possible, a repentant attitude and effect rehabilitation of the offender. So if we can fix the offender, that is a good thing. If they're not fixable, then that is also fine if they are punished accordingly, and others know very much that they're punished accordingly. Patrol and probation. We affirm that parole and probation have functions in the above process, but insist that they must be employed on such terms that the rehabilitation of the offender will be continued, and that society shall be protected. So, if somebody releases somebody on patrol or parole, and they offend, then it's a good chance that we should hold the patrol officers responsible, potentially. Rehabilitation, we believe it's self-evident that the secular humanist program of psychological and psychiatric treatment has failed, and assert that rehabilitation based on Christian principles, both in prison and on parole, should be given preeminence. Okay, so rehabilitation. What this is saying is we fully know that based on secular evidence that psychological and psychiatric treatment has failed in the criminal system, rehabilitation system, and that we should work on rehabilitation both in prison and outside and on patrol based on Christian principles. Volunteer programs. We encourage a working partnership between the offender, the correction worker, and the community through various volunteer programs which are designed to improve the morale of inmates, provide wholesome role models, and generally build positive attitudes through trust and caring. Instead of just throwing them in jail until they get out, and then they get out and there's no transitions, no nothing. Misuse of public office. We affirm that punishment should be just and proportionate to the crime because employment in positions of public leadership, trust, and service entails the necessity of setting, a good example. All convictions for breach of trust, embezzlement, bribery, corruption, disgracing the uniform, use of the office for public profit, and all similar crimes should carry proportionately heavier penalties than ordinary offenses. So if you're in a place of public office, your punishment should be higher than others. Productive assignments. Since work has greater remedial efficiency than incarceration, particularly against young offenders, we believe that work programs including community service should be employed where practical and then when the nature of the offense permits. basically, this is saying that we really want to try to fix people, and by getting out of them a lot of work, then that's a better thing than not. It has a better fixing rate than others. Restitution. We affirm the principle of restitution, particularly in relatively minor offenses in respect to persons and property, for the rehabilitation of the offender and the mitigation of the victim's suffering. So we believe that crimes should be proportionate to, or payment and stuff should match the crime, but it doesn't always have to be incarceration in jail. It might be other things. Maybe it's at the victim's choosing what the offender has to do to repay, and then the victim can pardon when said offender has finished. Anyways, that's an idea. Pretty cool. Okay, that's probably it for now. Okay, here we go.